Shalom Avracha to all of our listeners and all of our viewers from Yerushalayim. Shabbos, we davened in Shaarei Tzedek, a hospital here in Yerushalayim, and unfortunately we were informed with the news as it was progressing, insofar as the Hamas vicious, malicious attack of the kibbutzim in the south. And somehow or other, people do listen to the radio and they pass over bad news. So we were informed during the Hakafos of what was happening. And of course, we also heard and also saw the Iron Dome blowing up ballistic missiles that came from Gaza. And instinctively, it reminded us, people like me, and a good friend of mine from Yeshivas Mil, how things were 50 years ago in the Yom Kippur War. We knew that there was an attack that everyone knew by Egypt and Syria on Yom Kippur, which was Chal B'Shabbos. And just to mention a personal experience, I remember the words of the Maftir in Mincha of Yoina sinking very, very deep into the deepest recesses of my soul. And those words are quite appropriate, not only to the situation of 50 years ago on Yom Kippur, but also what's transpiring presently. So the pasuk tells us, "Hashem heitil ruach gedoyle alayom, vayisal godol bayom v'oniyo chishva lehi shovel." And then the Kadosh Baruch Hu cast the mighty wind toward the sea, and it became such a mighty tempest in the sea that the ship threatened to be broken up. And we all felt, when we heard those words, in Yerushalayim Yera Kodesh, we were no longer in the Batei Midrashos. We were in the Miklatim and the shelters, or others went to a forest which is not too far away. And we all felt that overpowering, overwhelming, desperate feeling of a Niyah Chishva Lehi Shovel, the mighty tempest was causing the ship to sink. Astonishingly, Yona's reaction was one of complacency. Yona descended to one of the ship's holds and had lain down and fallen asleep. The captain approached him and said to him, "How can you sleep at such a time? Kum kro el Elohecho ulai yisashes lekim lanu v'loi noived." Arise, call to your God. Perhaps your God will pay us mind or pay attention to our plight, and we will not perish. And afterwards, it was the most uplifting ne'ilah that I can remember, even from my childhood. The entire tzibur forgot about everything concerning themselves. It was a complete hesach hadas. Everyone has, of course, their own table of needs. Every individual knows what he needs, and during ne'ilah, the derech klal, generally speaking, does daven for himself, does implore Kadosh Baruch Hu for his own personal needs, and everybody should have a chasima toivo. However, the feeling was, without anybody telling us any type of motivation, any type of inspirational speech, everybody put aside. That was the feeling. It was a different atmosphere totally. There was an atmosphere where people negated and nullified all of their personal needs And the only priority was that the ship should not sink, even though we felt it was a Nia Choshva L'Ishovia based on the dire news that we heard. We davened for the safety of Klal Yisrael, that we should be saved. It wasn't that many years after World War II, where we all know exactly what happened to the Jewish people, decimated. 6 to 8 million people were viciously killed by the incarnation of evil of Amalek. So there was thoughts that went through our mind at that time, and it was thoughts that we really, really don't like to think about. Because since we're living in an age now and also then of tremendous progress that humanity made in technology and other areas, so we always ipso facto thought that concomitantly there was some sort of progress that was made vis-a-vis the feeling and relationship that the world has, the people of the world have to the Jewish people. After suffering so much unspeakable evil being perpetrated against the Jewish people, people that were obsessed with a psychological and pathological hatred, just lahareg or lahashmid or laabed, kol Yehudi mitav v'adzokein. If they could do it b'yom echad, they would do it. Just to simply erase the Jewish people from the face of the map for no reason whatsoever. So after such suffering, we all felt that there was also progress insofar as the world relating to us. They would have a little bit more sympathy due to the plight that we went through. But we saw then that nothing really changed. We also know the reaction of the Western world, one of indifference. 50 years have gone by, and once again we were lulled, every one of us, into a false security, a false safety and shelter. It's as far as our existential existence is concerned. We also thought that perhaps the fact that the Medinas Yisrael is reaching out to Hamas after all the years, and they consider them some sort of partner for a peace agreement. So we see that they made the same egregious error that Chamberlain made in beginning of World War II, the error of appeasement to Hitler, gave away Czechoslovakia, and we know exactly what happened afterwards. We cannot appease people that their whole existence is based on the fact that a Jew lives and a Jew cannot live. My father told me, what's the definition of a Nazi? We use the word very, very superficially today, but my father, who went through the Holocaust, told me a Nazi is someone who can't live because a Jew lives. And that's what we encountered with Hamas and their allies. They cannot live. They're totally obsessed with the fact that the Jews are living. And we shouldn't make any mistake. It would be a terrible mistake to make, that not the Jews in Eretz Yisrael are more at a danger of extinction, chas v'sholom, than Jews elsewhere. It's just that it's easier to do it here because we're closer and therefore we are easily targeted. But basically speaking, these people are obsessed with such a pathological hatred. The hatred expresses itself that they can't live. It disturbs them immensely. Ad-dirducha shel nefesh, if a Jew lives. So we know that tefillah, like even the people of the ship of Yonah said, Kum, kro, lelekecha, arise. So that's one of the 3 elements. That's mavir, that's like zero, tshuva tefillah, tzedakah mavirim es roya gezerah. Where there is a roya gezerah, there's a decree against the Jewish people. We understand nothing about the way HaKadosh Baruch Hu deals with Am Yisrael. But at this point, our response, our emotional response, is very crucial, and tefillah, pouring out the depths of our soul continuously, will surely be one of the elements that will bring about our great salvation. In Zichron Moshe, yesterday, today, and tomorrow, there's 3 days of uninterrupted tefillah. There are mishmaros that change. There's groups of people that change within the 24 hours. Certain people daven for 8 hours, others for 10 hours, for 6, others for 6. But the 24 hours is covered by a mass of people. It's packed from door to door. People are standing outside even in the middle of the night for 3 days straight, 24 hours uninterrupted, and we hope that the tefillahs will indeed help. And to strengthen our emunah and tefillah, the tefillahs from the dvarim, from the elements that's mavir, es roya gezerah. So we see from the Chazal, in the Pasuk in Tillim, that we say also, ironically, in Hallel, in Yom Tovim, it says, "Min haMeitzal ko Rosi ko Ononi v'Merchav ko." So the Chazal did not understand why it has to say B'Merchav. It could have simply said, from the straits, from the deep straits, from the deep abyss, I call upon HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and he answered me, would have been sufficient. Min haMeitzal ko Rosi ko Ononi ko. And God answered my tefillas. But it says with expansiveness, by merchav ko. So the Chazal point out, why was this necessary? What did David HaMelech mean by merchav ko? So the Chazal point out, Min haMeitzal refers to Mitzrayim, when the Jews were in Egypt. And it says, Vayimar es chayem b'avodah kosha, v'titru v'leveinim. They simply embittered our lives with baking work. Avodas porach, v'emos chayim, v'avodas porach, v'chomer v'leveinim, the most demeaning type of work possible. The slave masters were evil people, continuously hit the Jewish people, afflicted them terribly. And it says, Vayitzaku el Hashem, and the Jewish people prayed. And through prayer, what happened? Ononi v'merchav kol Klal Yisrael had a salvation, a redemption from Egypt. Kanfe yoina nechba b'kosef. Kanfe yoina nechba b'kosef means there were Klal Yisrael. It's a figurative term. It's a metaphor that Klal Yisrael, due to the tefillahs, so it wasn't only that the insidious elements were removed. It was not just that they stopped suffering and they didn't have the taskmasters to beat them and inflict them and wound them and inflict upon them bodily harm. No, not only that ceased, but the Klal Yisrael, due to their tefillahs, merited that they should leave Mitzrayim shining like the wings of a dove, covered with silver. Klal Yisrael saw miracles, revelations. They saw that Kadosh Baruch Hu changed around all the laws of nature. They left Mitzrayim with Nisim v'Nifloyos, and afterwards they went and they were Mekabel the Torah. It was Dafka the Dor, the generation that suffered in Mitzrayim and prayed by Yitzaku el Hashem fervently, the Umka Deliba, from the depths of their soul. They were the nation that not only was it a Sur Meirah, the evil, insidious elements were destroyed, but they reached the greatest dizzying heights of any generation of all time. They were the ones that saw the Shekhinah, like Kriyas Yamsuf. They were the ones that had the Torah. They were the ones that saw for 40 years the miracle of Man Min HaShamayim, of the man coming from heaven, Be'er Shel Miriam, and that they were encompassed with the clouds of glory for 40 years. So this is what Tefillah can accomplish. And we hope, we do not understand anything but Darkei Hashem, Tachlis HaYidiyah, says the Rambam, Sheneda, Shaloi Neda, the purpose of all knowledge is to understand that we don't understand anything. However, if we pray fervently, so God will help us, B'ezras Hashem Yisbarach, and this situation will not only be a situation of restoration to the previous situation, there'll be the insidious elements will be destroyed. Hamas will totally be destroyed, B'ezras Hashem Yisbarach B'karov, but it'll be even greater. There'll be revelations of the chasodim and toivus of the Kadosh Baruch Hu, just like there were when the Jewish people left Mitzrayim. So that is our fervent hope. However, there are other elements that we have to discuss that also will be of great help in securing a tremendous triumph and victory over the evil forces. But first and foremost, I'd just like to recount another personal experience. In Chol Hamoed Sukkos of 50 years ago, so all the Bnei Yeshiva were called. It was the first day of Chol Hamoed Sukkos 50 years ago, to the square in Meir Shorim, and Mara and Rosh Yeshiva, Zecher Tzaddik V'Kadosh L'Bracha, Reb Chaim Shmulevitz, spoke very shortly. And the first thing he said, that now, even though there's a mitzvah of Simchas Yontif, and usually people go, families go, they buy presents for their children. After all, they're also mandated to make sure that children are happy, buy the new shoes of their small children, etc. So he said, first and foremost, we do not go into the streets. We have to be sensitive to the situation. Not only do we have to worry for ourselves and protect ourselves, which is a selfish type of approach, even though it's very, very natural that a person should worry for his own welfare, you have to be careful, no question about it, not to be exposed to open areas at nighttime. During that whole period, no electricity. We lived in the dark, by candles. Nevertheless, we have to have a sensitivity to the people whose children are fighting for us. And Reb Chaim Shmulevitz told us very emotionally and went into everyone's heart that we have to realize Teiras Emes. And what is Teiras Emes? Teiras Emes is that every one of the soldiers that died protecting Klal Yisrael, so he has a status of Harugei Lud. What is the status of Harugei Lud? So Rashi says in Tainis, Daf Yud Ches, that any time the Gemara uses the terminology Harugei Lud, so what does Harugei Lud mean? Ein kol beria yechoyla lamoy bebechitzasam began Eden. No one has a right to stand in the premises in Gan Eden where they stand. They are closest to the Shechina in Gan Eden. Just repeat. Harugei Lud, Daf Yud Ches Amud Beis, page 18 in Maseches Tainis, the Tractate of Tainis, 18, folio 2. The Gemara brings down a story of two brothers. We'll see it. So Rashi says, Ein kol beria yechoyla lamba mechitzasam. That's the highest madrega. So we have to have a tremendous admiration and tremendous appreciation for the heroism and courage of every one of these individuals that goes into the fire to protect Klal Yisrael. He makes no personal calculations about himself. And those, of course, there were those that wanted to leave Eretz Yisrael, Motzei Shabbos, and Sunday night, they were anxious to leave Eretz Yisrael, and the Sunday night flights, Delta, United, and American did not cancel because they wanted to get their aircraft out of Ben Gurion. They were afraid there might be a direct hit. So those that were here were able to leave. They were very anxious to leave, and God helped that they left. But on the other hand, you had plenty of people that did everything they possibly could to come back there. It's Israel. One of the most moving stories was an Israeli in his 30s, just got married, had a little baby, desperately tried to get back there. It's Israel, paid exorbitant amount of money to allow to come back to protect his home country. And we have one of the most outstanding narratives possible about individuals like that. And that's the Gemara in Daf Yud Ches and Tainis that Chaim Shmulevitz mentioned. Extremely important just to read it. I don't have the English translation, but there was a Rosha Marusha Turianis that he was a Rosha Marusha, and he was an official of the Roman Empire during Golus Edom, after the Churban of the second Beis Hamikdash, and he wanted to kill Lulinus and Popos. They were two brothers in Lud. That was the geographical place. Omar Lohem, he said to them, Imiyama shechanan mishav azaryatem, yover Elohechem, v'yatzel eschem miyat, k'deru she'yatzel eschanan mishav azarya, v'yad Nebuchadnezzar. So he taunted them. He was planning to kill them. He was going to execute them. He says, if you are like Hanan, Mishael, and Azariah, the three people that were thrown into a Kifshana Eish because they refused to accept another deity, so let that God that saved them save you. So they said, no comparison. Hanan, Mishael, and Azariah, they were tzaddikim gemurim. And they were ruyim and they were worthy. They were perfectly righteous people, and they were indeed worthy and merited a miracle. Number two, Nebuchadnezzar was a royal person, and you're a commoner, so nothing will come out from you. There will be no nest that will be indirectly wrought because you are no more than a commoner. Afterwards, they said, and we want to tell you, we are not roy le'asas nes because nischayafnu kloya l'mokai, because we probably, says the Mashal, because we did bad deeds, and we're chayiv extermination by HaKadosh Baruch Hu. This is an unbelievable Gemara. V'im einato haragnu, and if you will not execute us, how behogim yesh le'makai. He has many agents that will execute us. Harbe dupim v'arayas. There's bears and lions. Yesh le'makai ba'iloma that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has in this world. Shepoigim b'anu v'argim esanu. They can attack us and kill us. Elo lo'masalnu HaKadosh Baruch Hu biyotcha. The only reason HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave us over to you, elishosivli pora, because he will pora biyotcha. He wants to execute you, and now he looks for a reason. This will be the reason. Afapik and Hargon, nonetheless, he killed them, and miyad, other officials of Rome came and killed him. Who were these two brothers, and what did they mean? Correct. And what did they mean? That they were chayiv kloya, they were chayiv extermination due to something else. So first and foremost, let's see what the story is before we see the addition of the Marshal in his explanation. So Rashi says, I believe it's worthwhile to read it verbatim. Could be I'm wrong, but I believe so. So Rashi says this is the story of Arugei Lud. Yesh Aimrim, Shenergo Albito Shel Melech, the daughter of the king, the daughter of the empire, was found killed. The Omru, of course, who were the ones that committed this atrocity? Who killed the daughter of the king? Always. We're going to be the victims. HaYehudim hargu. So the rumor went out that the Jews committed this crime. The Gozru Gezeira al Saineim Shal Yisrael Amdu Elu. So there was a gezerah against the entire Jewish people to be exterminated. As revenge and avenge for the Jewish people, even though there was no evidence, but there always a scapegoat to Jewish people for any bad thing that happens to the Goyim. The Jews are at fault, always a scapegoat, universally accepted by the Goyim that the Jews are at fault, the Jews are to blame. The Omduelu, these two brothers, Lulinus Upopis, Omdu, Podu Es Israel, they redeemed the entire Jewish nation. Vromru, Onu, Harganua, we're the ones that killed her, even though they didn't. We're the ones that killed her. And therefore, this individual was the one that carried out, as it were, he was an evil person, and he taunted these two brothers. And these two brothers acted heroically. They saved Klal Yisrael. The Melech killed them only they killed them. They admitted it, and he killed them, and therefore they were the ones that were fight that redeemed the Jewish people. The Enkel Ber Yochel Lamoy, the Mechitzasam Beganei, no one will have a right to be in the same precinct and premises as these two individuals. Heroism, courage, each one of the fallen soldiers, Rahmana litzlan, it's a tragedy that's unspeakable for the family, not just this generation, for generations to come. So Reb Chaim Shmulevitz taught us the proper hashkafa. He was the biggest Rosh Yeshiva in Yerushalayim at the time. We all have a din of Harugei Lud, and it's something which we have to remember. The appreciation, admiration, and sensitivity has to be all-inclusive. It cannot be superficial. It has to be from the depths of our soul. Everyone, everyone to his understanding and capabilities. That's, I remember very, very well. 50 years ago, all the yeshivas went back, learned very strongly, daven and Baruch Hashem. We were zeicher, we saw bechush with our feelings, the great nisim and inflayas, the wonders and the miracles that HaKadosh Baruch Hu wrought. Of course, Koyach HaTorah will always be a shield. So we have tefillah, we have Torah, and we also have tshuva and tzedakah. And it's interesting that the first shmuis that Mara Reb Chaim Shmulevitz gave after it was relatively safe, Milchemes Yom Kippur miraculously was won by the Jewish people. A miracle, one of the greatest miracles of all time. So the first shmuz Reb Chaim Shmulevitz said was simply overwhelming, something which cannot be forgotten. Not to take up too much time, so we'll read it in English. In Bahar, Parshas Bahar, in Perik Lamed Daled, the 34th Perik, in Medrash Rabbah, it's also brought down elsewhere. So the Chazal relate to us an unbelievable narrative. In the days of Rebbe Tanchuma, Jewish people in Eretz Israel needed rain. They came to him and said, Master, decree a fast that rain may fall. That's the mission in Tainus. If there's Rahmana litzlan Batzaires, there's a drought, and all of the Jewish people are in mortal danger. So what's the response? We decree, of course, a fast, and we pray. But first and foremost, there's a fast. And of course, the purpose is the rain may fall. So Rabbi Tanchuma decreed a fast once, and a second time, a third time, but no rain fell. So after the third time, he arose and told them, let all the people distribute tzedakah. With teshuvah, with tefillah, tzedakah, mavinas v'yag gezerah. Tefillah did not work. Somehow or other was not accepted by HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Also the Taniyos,
The fast days were not accepted. Distribute tzedakah. So one man arose and taking what he had in his house, took all of his possessions, and he went out to distribute them. So his divorcee met him. He happened to be divorced by a grusha. The divorcee met him on the way out to distribute all of his possessions. And she said to him, give me charity. Give me the tzedakah. For ever since the day when I left your house and you exited me from your house, no good has befallen me. All my days are long, bitter days of sorrow. Seeing that she was extremely poor, poorly dressed as well, and she was in great existential straits, so he was filled with compassion for her, and he gave her charity. And this is the account of the text, Mibsarcha al Tisalom. You shall not hide yourself from your own flesh. And even though there was a divorce, nevertheless, the Chazal consider Ishtei Kigufay, she's still close to you, even though she's a divorcee. So he was Mekayim, and this, of course, is in the Haftarah of the first day. This is the Haftarah of Yom Kippurim, B'sarcha al Tisalom. Ha'im zeh Soim Evcherchecho, is this a Soim, says the Novi, that Kadosh Baruch Hu was selected? Who needs your kindness? Who needs your Soim? Who needs your sackcloth? What do you need? Compassion, kindness, generosity to your fellow man. Let the slaves free. And from the closest people that you have, but do not hide yourself from them, but make sure you give them whatever they need. So a certain person seeing this went and reported this incident to Rebbe Tanchuma. He says, Master, you are here, and there's an Aveira being committed yonder, a terrible transgression. What have you seen? He asked him. I have seen, said the other person, a man talking with his divorcee. Not only that, he gave her money. So what's the conclusion? He must have been under suspicion in regard to her. There was the issue of yichud, and it's forbidden to be with your divorcee in close terms. Otherwise, what was his proof? He wouldn't have given her the money. So he's a suspicious person as far as immorality is concerned. This is what a person reported to Rabbi Tanchum. The Sender brought him. He said to him, my son, you know that the world is in distress and mankind is in distress, yet you go and hold and converse with your divorcee. No, even more so, you give her money. Had you not been under suspicion in regard to immorality vis-a-vis her, you would not have given her any money. The other replied, but did you not actually preach all of your life? From your own flesh you should not hide. I saw she was in straits, existential straits. I had compassion. After all, you're the one that said to all the people should go and distribute the charity. As I was about to distribute charity, my divorcee met me and said to me, give me charity. Ever since the day when I left your house, you exited me. Only sorrow has befallen me. Seeing she was not dressed in a proper manner, she was dressed with rags and in great straits. I was filled with compassion for her and gave her the money in consonance with the text, thou shalt not hide thyself from thy own flesh. Thereupon Rabbi Tanchuma raised his face to heaven and said, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Holy One, blessed be Sovereign of the universe, Ribono Shel Olam. If this man who was flesh and blood and committed apparently a cruel act And at this point, Al Pidin, halachically, he's not responsible for maintenance. He was filled with compassion for her and gave her. How much more so should you, Rebbeinu Shalom, be filled with compassion for us? We're the children of your children, Avram, Yitzchak, V'Yankiv, and we are dependent only upon you for our maintenance, our sustenance. Instantly, rain fell, and the world was relieved. Said Reb Chaim Shmulevitz, when he was in the shelter, and bombs were flying, missiles were flying in Yerushalayim, he overheard a neighbor who he knew was an aguna, an abandoned woman. Her husband did not give her a get. He was a fugitive. She was crying. Everybody more or less was crying and saying Tehillim very fervently. And all of a sudden she burst out and said, I forgive you, my husband. I forgive you for all the sorrow and all the travail and all the pain and suffering you caused me. Said Reb Chaim Shmulevitz. Afterwards, a few minutes afterward, they were allowed to leave the shelter. At that point, things turned around, and eventually a miracle happened in very short order. He feels. He asked Reb Chaim Shmulevitz, how do you know? So he said, it's written here in a Jewish heart that that woman who was Maver Amidaisov, that Tikkun Amidas, so that is similar to the story of Rebbe Tanchuma. She saved us, and perhaps she was one of the most instrumental people due to a very simple formula of forgiveness that saved the entire Klal Yisrael. That's Mavrel Midoisov. It's something which always helps, being kind, being generous. This is what we have to do. Tefillah, tzedakah, of course,